Hello grade 7s and welcome to your mathematics lesson for today, brought to you by WorksheetCloud.com. I hope you guys are well and enjoying the week. 3 weeks into lockdown, another 2 to go, so we're over halfway, so it's pretty much downhill from here on in. Guys, a reminder of the email address you can see on your screen, grade7@worksheetcloud.com. Please send me any questions about any maths topics that you'd like a bit of clarification on, and I'll be more than happy to answer those questions for you. Just a reminder that WorksheetCloud.com has previous lessons that we've recorded. It's also got activities and memos on there for you to go and do a little bit of additional practice of the topics that we are covering during these lessons. Right, so today we're going to be looking at decimals, and it's more of an introduction into decimals than anything else. So I'm hoping that it's a little bit of a recap before we get into some of the trickier things of decimals next week. So we'll be looking at that today after we've done our warm-ups and our mental questions. And then I've got your brain benders and your 24 game to end on. Okay, so first up is your warm-up activity for today. Remember to press pause and to work it out for yourself, and then come back after you've done so to check if you've indeed worked it out correctly. Right, press pause about now, guys. Guys, well done for getting through that. So it's quite a straightforward start. You can see on the top line that 28 needs to be split into four groups. So we know that 28 divided by 4 is 7. So we'll have 7, add 7, add 7, add 7. So 4 multiplied by 7 is 28. I then am going to go down to the third line. And I know something minus 7 must equal 0. Okay, so that must be 7 minus 7 is equal to 0. Then if I go to the next line down, I know that 13 is equal to 20 minus 7. So the cat is equal to 20. Then I'll just go look at my top line. So it must be 20 multiplied by 1 is equal to 20. So the mole is equal to 1. And then when I get to the bottom line, I'm just going to fill in those values. We said that the cat was 20, the dog was 7, the mole was 1, and the fishbowl was 7. Okay, so here the order of operations is important. So listen carefully here. So your division needs to come first. So the first thing you should have done was 1 divided by 7, which is 1 over 7. Then the 20 multiplied by 7, which is 140. And then 140 multiplied by 1 over 7, which is equal to 20. Okay, so what you should have had at the end was 140 multiplied by 1 over 7. And we've just done a multiplication of fractions. So you know you can write 140 as a fraction over 1. Then multiply the numerators to get 140. And multiply the denominators to get 7. And you know that 140 divided by 7 is equal to 20. So well done if you had recognized the order of operations for the last line. And well done if you had recognized that you needed to multiply 140 over 1 by 1 over 7 and getting the correct answer of 20. Okay, your mental questions for today. A long multiplication question. I'm interested to see what strategy you'll use. Then some mixed operations with some mixed numbers. Complete the sequence and see if you can name the sequence. And then a long division sum, and I'm quite keen to talk you through how I'm going to do that using multiplication. And then just order those fractions at the end. So go on and press pause and then come back and see how you guys did. Okay guys, so well done for working through those 5 questions. Okay, so the first question, 145 multiplied by 42, you absolutely could have done the column method. I'm going to show you a method that I like to use. So I'm going to split 145 into 100, 40, and 5. And I'm going to split 42 into 40 and 2. Okay. And now I'm just going to multiply these numbers. So first 100 multiplied by 40 is 4,000. And 100 multiplied by 2 is 200. And 40 multiplied by 4 is 1,600. And 40 multiplied by 2 is 80. 5 multiplied by 40 is 200. And 5 multiplied by 2 is 10. Okay, now I just add them up. So I should have 5,800. Add 2,019. And when you add those together, you should get 6,019. Okay, so just another method there, which for me is easier because, I'm not having to carry any numbers. I'm not having to do anything complicated to remember, putting things in columns. And I'm pretty much multiplying by numbers that end in 0, which is friendly numbers as we've discussed over the last couple of weeks. So have a look at that method and see if it is something that you'd be interested in. Okay, then I asked you to do these mixed operations with these mixed numerals. Okay, so we've got 3.5, and I'm just going to write them as improper fractions straight away. So 3.5 is going to be 7 over 2 divided by another 7 over 5 this time. Okay, and then subtract 5 over 3. So just remember, from mixed to improper, it's the whole number multiplied by the denominator plus the numerator. So for 3.5, 3 times 2 is 6 plus 1 is 7 over the original 2. For 7/5, 1 times 5 is 5 plus 2 is 7 over the 5. And for 1 2/3, 1 times 3 plus 2 is 5 over the original 3. Okay, but I know that when I divide by a fraction, I need to change that division sign to multiply. And I need to invert that fraction after the division sign, and it becomes the reciprocal 5 over 7. Okay, now I need to do my multiplication first because that's what my order of operations tells me. So I can say 7 times 5 is 35 over 2 times 7 is 14. Okay, or I can simplify diagonally. So I can see, okay, hang on, 7 can cancel out with 7. All right, and now we'll have 1 at the top and 1 at the denominator there. So now I've got 1 times 5 is 5, and 2 times 1 is 2, and I need to subtract 5 over 3. Okay, my lowest common denominator there is 6. All right, so 2 goes into 6 3 times. 3 times 5 is 15. We're subtracting. 3 goes into 6 twice. 2 times 5 is 10. And my answer is 1 over, sorry, not 1. 15 minus 10 is more than 1. It is 5 over 6. Okay? I hope you guys remembered those steps in working that out. Okay, so then you needed to complete that sequence, and I asked you if you could name it. So if you had recognized that 1, 4, 9, and 16 are square numbers, okay, so 1 times 1 is 1, 2 times 2 is 4, 3 times 3 is 9, 4 times 4 is 16. The next 4 numbers are going to be 25, 5 times 5, 36 is 6 times 6, 49 is 7 times 7, and your last number, 8 times 8, is equal to 64. Okay, so just to write those down, you should have 25, 36, 49, and 64. Okay, square numbers. So remember that square numbers are obtained by multiplying a number by itself. Okay, 816 divided by 17, sorry, 867 divided by 17. I'm going to just do it by multiplication. So I'm first going to go and see what is 17 times 10. Okay, we can all do that. So if I know 17 times 10 is 170, then 17 times 20 must be double that. Okay. I can go 17 times 40, and I can double 340 to 680. And I also know that 17 times 50 is going to be 850. Okay, so I haven't really done anything too complicated there. Okay, I've multiplied by 10. Once I've multiplied by 10, I can double to multiply by 20. I can double to multiply by 40. And then to multiply by 50, I'll just add that 170 onto the answer from multiplying by 40. Okay, so I've got 850. I need to get to 867. So if I multiply by an additional 17, there, okay, and I'm going to just write that answer there, 867. Okay, so I've got the number I'm looking for, and you can see that I've multiplied by 51 to get to 867. So 867 divided by 17 must be equal to 51. Okay, so I'll work through a couple of these each day next week, just so you can maybe understand the process a little bit better. But for me, working out long multiplication using long division by using multiplication, and then playing with the numbers is a lot easier than memorizing a whole different process for long division. Okay, then you needed to order those fractions, and remember that when you order fractions or you want to compare fractions, the denominators need to be the same. Okay, so I've got 3/4, 4/5, 2/3, and 1/6. So I'm looking for the lowest common multiple of 4, 5, 3, and 6. You can go write the multiplication tables of 4, 5, 3, and 6 out. Or if you know your tables really well, you'd identify that 60 is going to be your lowest common multiple. Okay, so if I want to change 4 into 16, so 3/4 becomes 45 over 16. All right. 4/5 becomes 48 over 16. 2/3 becomes 40 over 60. And 1/6 becomes 10 over 60. Okay, now it's pretty straightforward to see which is the biggest and which is the smallest, and I've asked you to arrange them in ascending order. Remember, ascending order is smallest to biggest. So 10 over 60 or 1/6 will be first. Okay, 40 over 60 or 2/3 will be next. 3/4 and then 4/5. So that's your ascending order, smallest to biggest. So the key there, to get the denominator to the same amount by finding the lowest common multiple of the denominators. Okay, right, well done, guys. Okay, today we're going to look at decimals. Okay, and just a brief introduction here for you. Everything to the left of the decimal is whole numbers. Okay, so you can see the word whole there, and we know the first number on the left of the decimal is your units or your ones, then your tens, then your hundreds, then your thousands, and your 10,000s. Okay, everything to the right of the decimal is smaller than 1. Okay, so that would be your tenths, your hundredths, your thousandths, your 10,000ths, all the way to your 10 millionths. Okay, now you in grade 7 are not going to have to go beyond thousandths. Just recognize that the words are spelt differently and they end in THS. Okay, so all the words to the right of the decimals end in THS. Okay, it's also good for you to recognize that to get to tenths, you divide by 10, or you can multiply by 1 over 10. So dividing by 10 is the same as multiplying by 1/10. Dividing by 100 is the same as multiplying by 1 over 100. Dividing by 1,000, same as multiplying by 1 over 1,000, and so on. Okay? So when we multiply by a decimal, So for example, when we multiply by 1/10, the 10 is the denominator, and that's the number that we're actually dividing by. Can seem a little bit convoluted and confusing, but once you start practicing it and getting your head around it, then it will make sense. Okay, so that's decimals. Now the reason I've got 2456,2703 is just to show you quickly, and I'll do that on the Jamboard. Okay, there it is there. I just wanted to show you that 2000, right, is going to be 2 multiplied by 1000. That 400 is 4 multiplied by 100. The 50 is 5 multiplied by 10. And the 6 is 6 multiplied by 1. Now, I'm pretty sure all of you will be able to understand that. Okay? It's the numbers to the right of the decimal that I'm keen to talk about a little bit further. So the 2703, the 0,2, which is this number here, okay, is equal to 2/10. Okay, remember 2 over 10 means 2 divided by 10. So how many times does 10 go into 2? 0. And there's 2 left over. Okay, the same with the 0,07, which is this number over here. That equals 7 over 100. How many times does 100 go into 7? 0. And there are 7 left over. So another way to look at this is if I have 7 over 100, how many zeros are there in the denominator? There are 2. So that tells me how many numbers there are after the decimal 1, 2. So the 3 is in the 10,000th column, all right, and that 3 is going to be equal to 0,0003. Okay. Why is it that? Because if you look just in front of it, in the decimals, you can see there are 3 numbers before it, and that's those placeholders there. Okay. So that 3 is valued at 0,0003. That is equal to 3 over 10,000. Okay, that's 1,000 there at the end. All right. So how many zeros are there in the denominator? There are 4 zeros in the denominator. How many numbers are there after the decimal? There are 4 numbers after the decimal. Okay, and the zeros go before the numerator that's at the top. Okay, so that's just a little bit of a recap on those decimals. Place value. Okay, place value of decimals. So to understand place value of decimals, we learn to write them in expanded form. Okay, and as you can see in the example, there's 23,401. All right, so I'm just going to take you back to the Jamboard and write 23,401. Okay, there it is there. All right, so we know that the 2 is worth 2 multiplied by 10. We know the 3 is worth 3 multiplied by 1. Okay, the 4 is worth 4 multiplied by 1 over 10. The 0 we don't have to worry about. And the 1 is equal to 1 multiplied by 1 over 1,000. Okay, so that's your expanded notation. It's taking the number and showing me what each individual number is worth. Okay, so if it's in the tens column, it's multiplied by 10. If it's in the units column or the ones column, it's multiplied by 1. In the tenths column, multiplied by 1/10. In the hundredths column, multiplied by 100th. And for the thousandth column, multiplied by 1,000. Okay, so what I want you guys to do is I want you guys to go ahead and I want you to write what the A, B, C, D in expanded notation or expanded form. And then below that, I would like you to do the opposite and look at the expanded form and write what that number is representing. Okay, so A, B, C, D at the top, you're writing in expanded form, and then A, B, C, when you're going to simplify the following numbers, you're going to write them as decimal numbers. Okay, off you go and have a go at that. Okay, great. So let's have a look at these answers. So we know for A, it's 4 multiplied by 1 plus 1 multiplied by 1/10 plus 9 multiplied by 1 over 100. Okay, so that's your 4,19. Okay, for B, you're going to have 2 multiplied by 10 plus 9 multiplied by 1 plus 2 multiplied by 1/10 plus 8 multiplied by 1 over 100, and I'm going to have to do the thousandth underneath. Okay, that's the expanded form of 29,281. Okay, let me just clear a bit of space here. Right, so 15,046, it's 1 times 10 plus 5 times 1. Sure, we're all good with that. Then we don't have to worry about the 0 in the 10th column. It's not equal to anything. Okay, but then it's 4 times 1 over 100 plus 6 times 1 over 1,000. Okay, and then the last one is going to be 4 multiplied by 10 plus 2 multiplied by 1/10 plus 8 multiplied by 1 over 100 plus 6 multiplied by 1 over 1,000 plus 5 multiplied by 1 over 10,000. Okay, so I'm just going to go back to this screen over here and just highlight for you. So that is the 10th column, so 1 over 10. 7 is the 100th column, so 7 over 100. 0 is nothing. 3 is the 10,000th column, so 3 over 10,000. Okay, I then asked you to have a look at the 3 questions below and to go the opposite direction and see if you could write the decimal number being represented by that expanded notation. So we know for A that 1 times 3 is 3. 6 times 1/10 is 6. So tenths and 7/100ths. So remember, 6 multiplied by 1 over 10 would be the same as 6 over 1 times 1 over 10, and that equals 6 over 10, which equals 0,6. And that is my 0,6 over there. Okay, the 7 over 1 times 1 over 100 would give me 7 over 100, and that is that 7 over there, 0,07. Okay, so for B they've asked us 2 times 10, so I'm pretty sure we all know that 2 times 10 is equal to 20. Okay, and 4 times 1 is equal to 4, so we've got 24. Plus 3 times 1/10 is 3/10, plus 5 times 1 over 100 is 24,35. And your last one is 7 times 1,000 is 7,000. 2 times 100 is 200. 3 times 10 is 30. Okay, so 7,230, 139. Okay, so the important thing there, guys, is to realize that 1 times 1/10 is this 0,1. Okay, 3 times 100th is this 0,03, and 9 times 1 over 1,000 is this one 0,009. All right, that's what their values are. Okay. Next, we're going to have a look at rounding off decimals. Okay, and this is also a really important concept to understand. So if I'm rounding off to the nearest tenth, right, which is the first number after the decimal. So in the first example, 0,73, if I want to round off to the nearest tenth, I always look at the number after the tenth. If I'm rounding off to the nearest hundredth, I look at the number in the thousandth column. If I'm rounding off to the nearest thousandth, I look at the number in the 10,000th column. Okay, so that the next number determines what the number you're rounding off does. So for example, in 0,73, I've got, and I'll just get it for you on the screen. In 0,73, I'm looking at the 3. Okay, if that 3 is less than 5, my 10th doesn't change. So 0,73 stays 0,7. Okay, rounding off to the nearest 10th. The 10th is the first number after the decimal. All right. I'm rounding off to the nearest hundredth in B. I look at the number in the thousandth column. So here I'm going to look at the 6. Okay, it's greater than 5. So my hundredth goes up. So that's going to be 2,41. Okay. And my nearest thousandth, I look at my 10,000th column. So for C number 1, I'm looking at this 2. It's less than 5. So my thousandth column stays the same. That stays as 10,476. Go and see if you can do question 2 of A, B, and C. Okay, so when you're looking at 3,47, remember I'm rounding off to the nearest 10th, the first number after the decimal, so I look at the hundredth column. 7 is greater than 5, so my 4 in the 10th column goes up 1, 2, 3,5. I'm rounding off in B2 to the nearest hundredth, so I look at the thousandth column. It's 7, which means it's greater than 5. So my hundredth column goes up by 1. So that's going to be 0,01. And in C2, I'm looking at the 10,000th column, and that is also greater than 5. So my thousandth column must go up 1 to 0,386. Okay. So just to recap, when we're rounding off decimals, whatever one you're rounding off to, so if I'm rounding off to the 10th, I look at the 100th. If I'm rounding off to the 100th, I look at the 1,000th. If I'm rounding off to the 1,000th, I look at the 10,000th column to if it's greater or if it's equal or greater than 5, then I round up. If it's less than 5, it remains the same. Okay. The next thing I want to do recap for you from grade 6 is multiplying and dividing by powers of 10. So powers of 10 are pretty much 10 times 10 is 100. 10 times 10 times 10 is 1,000. So remember, powers are exponents. So 10 to the power of 1, 10. 10 to the power of 2, 10 times 10 is 100. 10 to the power of 3, 10 times 10 times 10 is 1,000. Those are your powers of 10. They obviously increase. 10 to the power of 4, 10 to the power of 5, 10 to the power of 6, etc. Okay? I know that when I multiply a number by 100, I'll simply add 2 zeros on the end. Okay? So for A, below, you can see 8 times 100 we know is 800. Okay. For C, 29 times 1,000 we know is 29,000. But what happens when I multiply a decimal number like 3,4 by 10? What happens to that number? And you're quite correct in saying that that number should get bigger by one place value. Okay. So go ahead and do B, D, E, and F, and then come back and have a look if you've been able to multiply or divide those numbers correctly. Just one last thing. When we multiply, the number gets bigger. When we divide, the number gets smaller. Right, off you go. Okay, so I'm just going to fill in these answers because we know what they are. Okay, we know that when we multiply by powers of 10, the number gets bigger. So 3,4 multiplied by 10, we should have recognized that that gets one place bigger. And 3,4 to get one place bigger must be 34. Okay, so it gets one place bigger because it's only being multiplied by 10. You can have a look at the number of zeros in the number you're multiplying by, and that tells you how many places it gets bigger. So 8 multiplied by 100, there are 2 zeros, it gets 2 places bigger to 200. 3,4 multiplied by 10, 10's got 1 0, 3,4 gets bigger by 1 place to 34. 29 times 1,000, 3 zeros in 1,000, so 29 gets bigger by 3 places, so it gets 29,000, gets those 3 zeros on the end. Now when I divide, it's the same except it's getting smaller by that many powers of 10. All right. So if you have a look, 70,8 divided by 10,000. 10,000 is 10 to the power of 4. All right. So my 70,8 needs to get 4 places smaller. So my 70,8 needs to become 4 places smaller. So if I divide it by, I'm just going to do it step by step. If I divide it by 10, okay, it becomes 7,080. If I divide it by 100, that becomes 0,708. And if I divide it by 1,000, is 0,0708. Okay, and then if I divide it by 10,000, it becomes 1 place smaller. Okay, and that's going to leave me with, and let me just create some space for you. That's going to be 0,00708. Okay, so if it helps you to go step by step, and if you recognize that 10,000 is 10 to the power of 4, okay, 10 times 10 times 10 times 10, 4 times, and then that 70,8 gets 10 places smaller, or 10 times smaller. Okay, so let's have a look at E. Okay, 1, 3, 6, 7, 5, 1, 2. Okay, we know that 1,000 is 10 to the power of 3. 10 times 10 times 10, 3 times. So therefore this number 1,367,512 must get 3 places smaller, and that would be 1, 2, 3. All right, so let me just go through that again. If I divide by 10 once, okay, there's my decimal. My decimal is going to go there. If I divide by 10 twice, my decimal goes there. And if I divide by 10 3 times, my answer becomes 1,367,512. Okay, so there I've reduced my number by 10 3 times. Okay, and the last one that I've got to do, 421 900. Okay, now there are a lot of zeros there. Okay, so 9 zeros, 100 million. Okay, so my comma would actually be over here. Okay, so if I go back by 110, it would be there, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So after I've done by the 6, I'll have that. Okay, but I need to go 3 further. So I just simply go step by step because it makes a little bit more sense to me. So if I put a comma there, okay, that's 7. I can rub that out. Put a comma there, that's 8. And I can rub that out and put a comma there, that would be 9. Okay, so it's up to you. I like to go step by step and I like to break it up and chunk it. I feel that it's very easy to make a silly error, or sometimes it's not even silly. The numbers, they're 9 zeros and you've got to move the number 9 times. So I just find it a lot easier to break that 9 up. You can break it up into 3, then another 3, then another 3. Or you can do 2, 2, 2, 2, 1. You must decide on what you want to do, but for me to do all 9 zeros in one go can kind of lead to an error, particularly when you get into the zeros on the left-hand side of that 4 that's in the 400,000 column. Okay, so don't worry about the size of the numbers. It's the principle that counts. When we multiply by powers of 10, the number gets bigger. When we divide by powers of 10, the number gets smaller. Okay. Right, and then just your last thing. It's been quite a long haul this morning. Okay, but I wanted to get this decimal work done because I want to move into multiplying and dividing by decimals. The following slide is all about converting from decimals to fractions in their simplest forms. Now, what I've done in the red block there is I always tell my students that there's some fraction that you should just know. You should just know that a half is 0,5. You should just know that a quarter is 0,25, that a fifth is 0,2, that an eighth is 0,125, and that a tenth is 0,1. If you know those, then it can make your life a lot easier. If you know what 1/4 is, it's quite straightforward to work out what 3/4 is. If you know 1/5, then you can work out 2/5, 3/5, 4/5 by just keep adding 0,2. The same with an eighth. 1/8 is 0,125. 2/8 is the same as a quarter, and you already know that. 3/8, okay, 0,125 times 3. 0,375. 4/8 is a half, you already know that, etc., etc. Okay, so it's going to make your life a lot easier. So what I'd like you to do, I'd like you to go and have a shot at converting the first 4 decimals to fractions in their simplest forms. That's quite an important instruction. And then the 4 fractions at the bottom left hand of your screen, go and convert those to decimals. I'm going to give you a hint first there. Your denominator needs to be 10, 100, or 1,000 to convert a fraction to a decimal without actually doing a division sum. Okay? So 1/5, yes, it does mean 1 divided by 5, but we don't have to do the actual calculation of 1 divided by 5 if we just convert 1/5 to a fraction out of 10, 100, or 1,000. Okay, off you go and do those, guys. Okay, so let's see if you guys were able to do that. So 0,8, it's 8/10, so we'll have 8/10, and both 8 and 10 can be divided by 2, so that's 4/5 in its simplest form. 0,06 is 6/100. Okay, the 6 is in the 100th column. There are 2 zeros here. That tells you there are 2 numbers after the decimal. Okay, 6 and 100 can be divided by 2, so that's 3/50. 0,003 is 3/1000. That cannot be simplified any further. And 2,8 is 2 and 8/10. Okay, and 8/10 can be divided by 2, so it's 2 and 4/5. Okay, so that's how we convert decimals to fractions. The next 4 fractions you needed to convert to decimals. So 1/5, and my hint was change that to a denominator of 10, 100, or 1,000. So it's, for me, easiest to say 5 times 2 is 10, and 1 times 2 is 2, because remember, whatever you do to the denominator, you must do to the numerator, and that is equal to 0,2. 3/4. Okay, so if you didn't know that 1/4 was 0,25, I would change this into a fraction out of 100 by multiplying by 25, and I get 0,75. Okay, for 7/25, again, I would change that into a fraction over 100 by multiplying by 4. So now I've got 28 over 100. That's 0,28. And my last one, 3 over 250, I'm going to convert to 1,000. That's going to give me 12 over 1,000. And that's going to give me 0. Sorry, I think that's going to be blocked out by the cutout. So I'm just going to write it underneath. That's 0,012. Okay, so fractions to decimals, get the denominator to 10, 100, or 1,000 by multiplying. Whatever you do to the denominator, you do to the numerator. Then it's pretty straightforward on how to convert it to a decimal. Okay, so there's your finisher for today. We're almost there. I appreciate it's been a long lesson today, but it is Friday and you do have the weekend off. So just stick with it for about another 5 minutes. Go ahead and work this out. Remember that the 4 boxes, the 200, the highlighter, the paper aeroplane, and the 36 need to add up to 456. And then I'd like you to actually think, what is the sum? What is the calculation that we're actually working with here that gives us 456? So it is multiplication. So what multiplied by what is going to give you 456? Off you go. Okay, great, guys. Well done for working that out. I'm just going to redraw this square for us quickly. Okay, it looks something like that. There's 200. There's 4, there's 36. Okay, so I know that 9 multiplied by 4 is 36. Okay, I did trial and error with the 200. Okay, so I put 10 there and 20 there. Some of you might have done the other way around. You're going to have to see how that works. 10 times 4 is 40, and then 9 times 20 is 180. Then if I add these together, I get 380. And if I add these two together, I get 76. And those two added together gives me 456. So what is my sum? My sum is the 10 and the 9 is 19 multiplied by the 20 and the 4. And that gives me 456. Okay, well done, guys, if you've stuck with that. And managed to work that out. Okay, there is your 24 challenge for today. Remember to use all 4 numbers and any of the operational signs to get up with the answer of 24. Okay, so I hope you guys are managing to develop your numerical skills and your computational literacy and number flexibility and all these fancy terms that I'm throwing at you. Basically, I just hope you're getting more comfortable with dealing with numbers. Okay, once you're comfortable with numbers, everything else falls in place. It's just like reading a book. Okay, so once you learn to read, you can read forever. Once you learn to deal with numbers and break them up and put them back together again and manipulate them to make your life easier, maths will become an absolute breeze for you. Okay? Guys, thank you very much for sticking with me today. I know it was a long one and I do apologize about it. Sometimes math teachers get a little bit carried away, but a lot of revision there from grade 6. Just make sure you understand these principles so that when we do some more decimal work next week, it makes a lot more sense. Please feel free to send me any email requests, queries, questions. to grade 7 at WorksheetCloud.com. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the time with your families. And we got less than 2 weeks to go. So happy days. Right. All the best, guys. Cheers.